Now, one story continues to dominate the headlines here. The shock announcement by Deputy Prime Minister hengsweekeat that he's stepping aside as leader of the PAP's 4G team. And an unexpected setback to Singapore's leadership transition. Now, the big question now is, who will be the country's next Prime Minister? DPM Heng's decision comes a week before his 60th birthday, and he says it's something he had been mulling over for some time.
As those of you who have worked with me know, I am a workaholic, and I put my heart and soul into what I do. And therefore, I've been thinking about it as to whether am I the right person. And last year's pandemic was a real turning point, because I don't think in the history of Singapore that we had a finance minister that had to deliver 5 budgets in 1 year.
As the Straits Times Singapore editor Zakir Hussain joins me now to discuss this further. Welcome, Zakir. Zakir, for a start, you were at the press conference held at the Istana yesterday. What was the mood like? Now, many have said that DPM Heng seemed at peace with his decision. What did you observe?
I think the mood was genuinely quite solemn, and even though all the ministers on stage were masked, you could sense the expression that they were, I think, genuinely shocked. Many of them had only found out about DPM's decision about 24 hours earlier, when they were at a meeting of the leadership. And I think their answers were quite, reflected that they were quite carefully calibrated. And I think one of the key points they wanted to stress was that, look, it was still a team that stayed united and would try and, its main priority at the moment was on dealing with the challenges brought on by the pandemic. But at the same time, I think they recognized that Singaporeans would be concerned by this, and I think they did want to kind of reassure them that, look, we're still a united 4G team, and while DPM Heng may no longer be, has expressed his desire to step down and to step aside as their leader, he will remain DPM, and he will still help remain in this post where he can contribute to Singapore.
Right. Yes, Zak, so on that point, while Mr. Heng still remains as DPM, it was announced last night that Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean will be acting Prime Minister whenever PM Leehsienloong is absent. So help us understand, what is the role of the Deputy Prime Minister?
While one criteria to be considered or to be Prime Minister was to have had a stint as Deputy Prime Minister, and I think Mr. Goh Chok Tong had that, Mr. Leehsienloong had that, and DPM Heng was elevated to DPM in preparation as PM in waiting. At the same time, I think for the most stretches, Dr. Toh Chin Chye and Dr. Goh Keng Swee in the early 60s and 70s, and in later years, you had Professor Jayakumar, Dr. Tony Tan, Mr. Wong Kan Seng, and more recently, Mr. Teo Chee Hean and Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam. Most of our deputy prime ministers were not, were also strong, dominant number twos, and who did continue to coordinate policy and various efforts, as more senior ministers helming the team. And I think this is in recognition of their contributions, but also their abilities. And I think this is a role that DPM Heng will continue to play, at least for some time now, as he has in the past few years.
Again, I want to revisit yesterday's session at the Istana, because during the Q&A session yesterday, you asked the panel of ministers about the timeline of the succession plans. Now, let's have a quick look.
Can Singaporeans expect, say, a rough timeline, as well as a bit more detail on the process for selecting the next 4G leader? And does PM and ministers expect this to be done, say, well ahead of the next GE or in good time?
Well, as I said in my main statement just now, this is a matter which is on top of their minds. The immediate priority is to deal with the health and economic crisis, but we know that succession is a very, very important and urgent issue. This is a process which takes more than a few months, but I think that it should not take more than a couple of years. And I hope that very much that it will have a clear outcome before the next general election. And that would be a reasonable time frame to work towards.
So we've heard PM's answer. Now, before the new 4G leader is announced, there will be a cabinet reshuffle in a couple of weeks. So what can we expect, Zakir, from now till then?
I think from now till the cabinet reshuffle, I think what is likely to happen is you will see DPM and the ministers actually meet, with party branches, and I think senior PAP cadres. And I think some of that will go on quite intensively in the next few weeks, because many of them had, I think, firstly supported DPM Heng and when he was chosen by the ministers, and not once but I think in 2 party elections they had elected him as first Assistant Secretary General. So I think it's the party, and its senior leadership remain a key constituency, and I think they will also be asking or seeking some answers as to this latest development in turn of events, but also who and how the next few months will unfold. I think in the cabinet reshuffle, hopefully later this month, we might see some hints of who some of the front runners might be.
Yep.
The finance minister post is something I think folks will closely watch, but there are also other key ministries. But I think between then, as well as when the PAP leaders themselves meet to decide who should take DPM Heng's place, I think it might take I think a couple of years at least. But I guess you will see some of them step up, taking on a greater profile, and especially in things like handling of the ongoing pandemic and the crisis.
Zak, on that note, I want to get your take, your guesses on the cabinet reshuffling.
Well, could be a tough thing. I mean, I think many people are speculating it's one of several candidates who will be finance minister. You have Ms. Lawrence Wong and Ms. Indrani Raja, who are already second finance ministers. I think people are thinking Mr. Wong could be moved up. And Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung is also someone who's seen as sort of possibly taking on that post.
Right. Well, DPM Heng stepping aside is a setback to PAP's succession plans. How will the party navigate this, against the backdrop of the ongoing battle against the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think one key message they will probably need to send across is that, regardless of who is, their leader or marshalling the team, it remains a united team that is able to bring Singaporeans together, but more importantly, to come up with policies and strategies, whether it's resuming or restoring travel bubbles, or coming up with measures or initiatives to help Singaporeans who are left behind cope and reskill. All these are important elements, and I think these 4G ministers will have their work cut out. But I think we've had an election. The next GE is not due till 2025 and 2025, and I think there's scope for probably you will see some consolidation, I think, among party ranks. And I think one thing that could also happen is I think party activists might it's almost like a reset of the process that happened several years ago. When they decided on DPM Heng. I think you will see party activists weigh in on who they feel should be the leader, not just for the party, but also for Singapore in the next decade and perhaps longer.
So to run up our discussion for today, I want to talk about the reactions to the announcement. The opposition parties have weighed in on DPM stepping aside, giving very different reactions.
Yeah, and I think that startled some of us, but I think it kind of represents, the Workers' Party, which made significant gains in the last election. I think has also been able to read the mood among Singaporeans, and I think they express concern about the latest turn of events. But I think leader of the opposition, Pritam Singh, was quick to say that look, the WP will work with whoever is the government of the day and looks forward to Singaporeans looks forward to working with the next leader. But you've got also the PSP expressing some concern, but also noting that this will shatter business and investor confidence. I think that's not been borne out yet, and in fact, I think our projections are that in the coming weeks or so, business and investor confidence is not likely to be shattered much. I think. There are a few things, although the identity of the next Prime Minister may not be unknown, but there are a few constants about Singapore politics that remain. There is still considerable political stability. There is also some degree of policy consistency. And I think as long as these factors continue to be in place, confidence in Singapore is not likely to be shaken very much, if at all.